This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thank you for joining us for CBN NewsWatch on this Thursday, May 29th. I'm Ephraim Graham. We have lots to get to today. We're going to begin this half hour with news from the Middle East. President Donald Trump says it is true. He's warned Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu not to attack Iran's nuclear facilities at this time. As Chris Mitchell reports now from Jerusalem, Trump wants to avoid military action while the U.S. is still negotiating with Iran over its development of nuclear weapons.
President Trump made the statement in the Oval Office.
I told him this would be inappropriate to do right now because we're very close to a solution. Now, that could change at any moment, could change with a phone call. But right now, I think they want to make a deal, and if we can make a deal, save a lot of lives.
The Israelis fear a bad deal that could let Iran keep building nuclear weapons and want a permanent solution, which means destroying Iran's nuclear facilities. But Trump still seems to believe such a violent solution can be avoided.
There are only two outcomes. You know what the two outcomes is: a smart outcome and there's a violent outcome. And I don't think anybody wants to see the second. But I think we've made a lot of progress, and we'll see.
As for the Iranians, one of their top military leaders says the regime is ready to take on and defeat the U.S. if Trump decides on using military force.
We have been accumulating power for years to defeat the world's biggest power. We have always assumed that we will ultimately engage in a battle with a superpower, and we must defeat it.
Here in Israel, in an historic decision, the Knesset voted Wednesday to strengthen the Jewish presence in Judea and Samaria by building 22 new communities. Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz said the decision anchors our historical right to the land of Israel. And at the Jerusalem prayer breakfast today, Ambassador Mike Huckabee told people from 40 nations about the biblical connection to the land of Israel.
Why is there an Israel? Well, because God promised it, and God keeps his promises. And he's patient in keeping them, but he also gives us warning. And he tells us not to forsake his word or his will. And we come today to remind all of ourselves that should we stand against God or his purpose, we will pay the consequences.
Chris Mitchell's here now to give us more. So, Chris, why is this Knesset decision so historic?
Well, first of all, Ephraim, it reverses what Israel did 20 years ago. 20 years ago this August, they withdrew from Gaza, and several communities in northern Samaria. It was part of what was called at the time the Gaza disengagement. And what they did at that time was withdraw from about 9,000 Jewish people from Gaza. And as I mentioned, some of these communities in northern Samaria. So it reverses that decision. It's designed to prevent a Palestinian state. And really what marks a strategic decision and shift for Israel away from a two-state solution. And one of the one of the members advocating this bill says the next step will be declaring sovereignty over what the world calls the West Bank and what is known here as the biblical heartland, Judea and Samaria. So it really is a mark to Israel reclaiming some of its biblical heartland against much of the opposition from the world and much of the world media.
Chris, why would Israel be more eager to use a military option against Iran than diplomacy?
Well, they've been dealing with this nuclear issue with Iran for decades, and they don't trust Iran, which violated the 2015 JCPOA. That agreement was meant to limit Iran's nuclear program. It didn't, and they believe that Iran is committed ideologically and theologically to have these nuclear weapons. And I would say geopolitically, they want to have a sort of a nuclear umbrella over the whole Middle East. And so Israel doesn't believe diplomacy is going to stop Iran, and they believe that the military option is really the only way to stop and destroy Iran's nuclear facilities. Now, they may be surprised by a deal that President Trump says may happen, but right now I believe they think military option is the only way to go forward.
Let's turn our focus now to Hamas. Are there signs that it's losing its grip on the people of Gaza?
It really does seem that way, Ephraim. The new humanitarian aid plan seems to be working, and what that's doing is removing the control of Hamas over the population, by just taking them away from depending on Hamas that steals much of the humanitarian aid that goes into Gaza. It also removes a source of income from Hamas. And also, just yesterday, there was a video of people that stormed a Hamas warehouse. Unfortunately, Hamas killed about 5 of those people, but hundreds of people took over this warehouse. It's a sign of weakening of the control of Hamas over the population. And we also have seen some demonstrations of people turning against Hamas. So it seems like perhaps there's cracks in the Hamas leadership. Certainly, most of the Hamas leadership has been eliminated. We'll see if the leaders that are left will be able to keep control over the population.
In your story earlier, we saw Ambassador Huckabee at the prayer breakfast today. What else did he share?
Well, one of the things he addressed, Ephraim, was the anti-Semitism on American college campuses. And he made the point that really it's not a battle of ideology or even philosophy, but he described it as a spiritual battle between good and evil. He said it's not a left or a right issue, a Democrat or Republican, but a decision to either go with God or go with the forces of evil. He also made it clear that to the Jewish people that they're not alone, that he, in his role as ambassador, and certainly the many Christians that were there from 40 nations, would stand with the Jewish people. And as he said, the Christians owe a debt to the Jews because of the Christian faith that's built on the foundation of the Hebrew Scriptures.
All right, our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell, thank you always for your insight. Look forward to hearing from you come tomorrow. Back here at home, a federal court is blocking President Donald Trump from imposing sweeping tariffs on imports under an emergency powers law. The ruling comes after 7 lawsuits argue Trump exceeded his authority under that law. President Trump says he does have the power to act because the United States trade deficits amount to a national emergency. However, the plaintiffs say the trade deficit is not an emergency because the country has run a trade deficit with the rest of the world consecutively for decades. President Trump might still be able to temporarily launch import taxes of 15% to 150 days to nations where the U.S. runs a substantial trade deficit. The FBI is investigating after claims a group of evangelical Christians were targeted during a prayer rally in Seattle over the weekend. Came after the mayor blamed Christians for violence at the event and after a demonstration at Seattle City Hall this week. Our Charlene Aaron is on this story.
The prayer rally in Seattle's Cowell Park Saturday quickly turned violent when members from the LGBTQ community and Antifa showed up to protest.
One of them actually pulled a knife and threatened a 17-year-old on our side. And not to mention, while the kids were getting haircuts, there was actually sexually, explicit, lewd acts being done directly in front of the children.
The rally was held in an area with a well-known gay neighborhood at the direction of the city. Ross Johnston, co-leader of the Mayday USA prayer event, tells CBN News they knew there would be protests, but he never expected such violence.
Multiple police officers were assaulted. There was water balloons with urine being thrown. There's 2 people who rushed the stage.
The FBI is looking into charges of attacks on religious believers. Dan Bongino, the FBI's deputy director, wrote on X Tuesday, "We have asked our team to fully investigate allegations of targeted violence against religious groups at the Seattle concert. Freedom of religion isn't a suggestion." And Pastor Paula White Cain spoke out from the White House, saying the White House Faith Office condemns the violent disruption of Seattle's Mayday USA worship event. Public officials must protect the inalienable rights of all citizens, regardless of their faith or religious beliefs. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Coming up, President Trump calls it his big, beautiful bill. See why one organizer says Americans will benefit if the bill is enacted. Stay with us. You're watching CBN NewsWatch. Welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. President Donald Trump's budget and tax bill narrowly passed the U.S. House. So what are the chances of its approval in the Senate? That's what we're watching. Phil Kerpen, president of the American Commitment, argues while the bill is not perfect, Americans will benefit once the law is enacted. However, in this week's episode of the Global Lane, Kirpin suggests the bill would improve significantly if the Senate takes action to codify the deregulation provisions.
I give this bill a solid B. I think it's got the really key provisions that we need to see in there, extending all of the Trump tax cuts, bringing back accelerated expensing for businesses, 100% bonus depreciation. That's really important to get the economy moving again. It extends the individual rate cuts, the small business cuts, and it's got some significant spending reforms, although clearly not as many as we would have liked to see. So I think that it's a victory for the American people. It'd be very positive for the economy, and I'm hoping that the Senate will be able to either improve it or pass it as is at the very least.
Well, I want to remind our viewers some of the other things that the bill passed by the House would eliminate are taxes on tips, keep the Trump tax cut, provide money for the border wall, border protection, reduce spending by $1.5 trillion. But, Phil, you say it doesn't do enough to secure deregulation. So tell us about that and the need for passage of the REINS Act. What is it and what would it do?
Yeah, the REINS Act is really, in my opinion, the key unfinished business from the Tea Party era. This was a bill, it was invented by a remarkable guy named Lloyd Rogers from Northern Kentucky, former Navy veteran and a former local elected official there. Back in that Tea Party summer when the town halls were roiling, he went to his town hall meeting, went up to his congressman, brought a constitution and his water bill, and he said, "Congressman, my constitution right here says all legislative power is vested in a Congress, but my water bill right here says that it's going to double because of EPA stormwater management rules that you never voted on. So how is that allowed? How is that allowed under our Constitution?" And his congressman kind of scratched his head and said, "You know what, you're right. We should have voted on that. We should have to vote on that." And this is a bill that would require any significant new regulation to get prior approval from Congress, House and Senate majorities before it could take effect, instead of the way it works now where agencies can do more or less whatever they want unless you can somehow muster enough votes to stop them. So this would really be a sea change in the whole process of how federal regulation works. And I think we'd be able to stop really all of the worst regulations, even when they're Democrats running the House, Senate, and White House, if we had this requirement that Congress actually vote on these. And, I think that if we had that process in place, we'd be able to, as I said, stop a lot of the worst and also stop this pendulum from swinging so wildly with presidential elections.
Phil, I think a lot of people don't understand how important deregulation really is to Trump's economic agenda. So why is it needed? What needs deregulating?
Well, it's absolutely critical. First of all, the energy area, which is so crucial, and there are many energy provisions that have stayed in this bill, whether REINS is in or not, reversing a lot of the Green New Scam, as the president called it, giveaways from the Inflation Reduction Act. But regulations have driven up the cost of energy tremendously in this country, which not only means you pay more on your bills and at the pump, but you pay more for everything grown, shipped, and manufactured, which is everything. We also have a lot of financial regulations that have made it very expensive to be involved in the financial system. We have lots of regulations on public companies that have made it very difficult to access public capital markets in this country, denying capital for early stage companies to grow, as well as investment opportunities for regular folks who can buy public companies. We've got massive amounts of labor regulation. We've got massive amounts of land and water regulation. So really any area of policy you think about. I didn't even get into healthcare, which is probably the most overrated sector in our whole economy. And so you look at kind of everything across the board, and there are a lot of different studies out there that kind of try to measure the impact of federal regulation. It's an inexact science, but every study has it in the trillions of dollars. So it rivals taxation at this point as a cost on the economy. And Biden was the biggest regulator in world history. Casey Mulligan from the University of Chicago, who, by the way, is tabbed to be Trump's deregulation czar, but he's waiting for Senate confirmation. He has been for months now. But his analysis found that just the new regulations in the 4 years of Biden had an average cost per household of about $47,000. So we're talking very, very large expenses that have been imposed on the American people. Now, the biggest of all the Biden regulations was the electric vehicle mandates, which Trump has sort of put on hold, and we hope are going to be permanently repealed in the One Big Beautiful Bill. And so The worst of the worst may be repealed. But remember, Trump repealed those his first time in office when Obama did them, and Biden brought them right back. So if we could somehow fix the process so that Democrats can't just bring these very expensive regulations right back, we'd be in a much better place going forward.
Okay, deregulate and lower taxes. What a concept. Phil Kerpen, American Commitment President. Thank you, Phil, for joining us.
Thanks, Gary.
Also, in this week's episode of The Global Lane, Ukraine's war escalation or peace. Can Donald Trump persuade Putin to engage in talks with Zelensky and sign a peace deal? And hurricane season begins this weekend. We're going to examine climate change and what the science reveals about the intensity and frequency of major storms. You can see it all on The Global Lane this evening on the CBN News Channel. It begins at 8. You can also see it on the CBN News app, or you can watch on YouTube. Still ahead, from blueprint to battlefield in just a few days, how one company is using new technology to fight the wars of tomorrow. In the race to modernize U.S. defense, the Pentagon is betting heavily on what's known as deep tech, high-risk, high-reward technologies that could shape the future of warfare. One Virginia company is getting the attention of the U.S. and our allies in this area, referred to as Silicon Valley East. National security correspondent Caitlin Burke is on the story.
Here in a small industrial park in downtown Manassas, Virginia, the future of defense is taking shape, quite literally. This is Rapid Flight, a young defense tech company manufacturing autonomous drones for military application.
What Rapid Flight is doing is really disrupting the way drones are designed and deployed to meet the new types of missions and customer requirements that are just emerging as we go.
Fast, modular, and built on demand, their systems line up with the Trump administration's call for a new era of American technological innovation.
For a future stamped with the American character, the federal government must become an early adopter and avid promoter of American technology.
Rapid Flight leverages 3D printing to go from blueprint to battlefield in a matter of days. CEO Asina Alich tells CBN News this could give America and its partners a powerful edge.
We deliver the mission-ready drones and interceptors that allies and the United States defense can afford and rely on. We have this modular capability and tech that let us really change our design real time based on any emerging threats and missions.
Brandon Smith, an engineer and Rapid Flight's VP of Strategy, says recent conflicts highlight the power of cheap and adaptable drones on an ever-changing battlefield.
We've had demonstrations in Ukraine with the MOD over there. We scheduled a demonstration, we got over there, we performed our first mission, and they said, that's nice, but we need this right now. And we changed the design on the fly and supported their need. And then they said, oh, that's nice, but we've changed again, we need this.
What are your drones designed to be able to do? What are they capable of?
You're going to hate this, everything. Our drones can do anything. We do rapid payload integration. So we have a common avionics system that allows us to plug and play or develop new drivers for any new technology, any new payload that our customers want to go in. So we're not designed for one specific payload, although individual aircraft have accommodations for different things like cameras and cutouts and antennas and things like that. Changing those payload configurations is the kind of thesis of Rapid Flight, being able to change that on the fly and adapt to user needs. So when you ask, what do? It's basically whatever our customers want.
Their mobile production system also means drones can be mass-produced anytime, anywhere.
You take the printers we have in our lab here, you take the manufacturing tables, tools, people, know-how, you put all of that into a form factor that's shippable all over the world and deposits that in a place where it can run autonomously, depending on how long you supply it, for 30 to 60, 90 days. If they have stuff out in the field, they can come back to us and say, I want to put this radio in this airplane. We do a quick design change on our end, send them the files electronically, and all of a sudden you're up and printing the tool you need at the moment you need it.
Just as important as the tech, where it's made. The Manassas facility represents a growing push to reshore key defense capabilities, ensuring that critical systems are built on U.S. soil.
By making drones in the United States, we can basically respond faster to emerging requirements and threats, while also protecting our IP and not depending on foreign supply chains.
Rapid Flight is one of several emerging defense tech companies drawing serious attention and contracts from the Department of Defense. As global threats evolve, U.S. defense strategy seems clear. Think small, move fast, and invest big in next-generation capabilities made right here at home. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Manassas, Virginia.
And stay with us. Your Thankful Thursday message is coming up next.
Get the inside scoop on Washington politics from the DC Debrief podcast. Don't miss this unique CBN News perspective straight from the nation's capital, because truth matters.
Back now with a cross-country motorcycle ride to honor veterans. It's a tradition started by Vietnam veterans called Run for the Wall. Each May, motorcycle riders participate in a 10-day ride, also called a run from coast to coast. The journey starts in Ontario, California, and ends at the Vietnam Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C. Participants of all ages ride to honor veterans, their families, and to raise awareness of those still missing.
It was an amazing cross-country endeavor, even just as a passenger, to see the outpouring of patriotism across this nation.
Following the ride is a 3-day run from D.C. to the Middle East Conflicts Wall in Illinois, highlighting the motto, "We ride for those who can't." Time now for your Thursday Thankful. I hope you'll join me in this prayer of gratitude. Father, thank you for guiding me through it all. Your peace is not the absence of a storm. Your peace is your presence in the storm. And somehow, when I'm still, the silence of your peace drowns out the sound of the storm. Amen. With that word, make this entire Thursday a thankful one. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel. You can find them there at any time as well as online. That address is cbnnews.com. Take a moment and let us know what you think about the stories you've seen here today or any day. You can email us newswatch@cbn.com. You can also reach out and touch us on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. We look forward to seeing you right back here same time tomorrow. Goodbye and God bless.